Marie Osmond's life looks like fame, success, and a legendary family name. But beneath that image is a story she avoided telling for most of her life, one filled with fear, emotional weight, and childhood trauma she would later confront in her own words. The most powerful shift in her journey comes when she finally breaks that silence and faces what she buried for years. But that silence didn't start there. It started in childhood. Marie grew up in the famous Osmond family, raised in a strict Mormon household as the only girl among 8 brothers. Privacy was rare, and individuality wasn't encouraged. Life in the Osmond home wasn't just busy. It was structured around performance, discipline, and constant expectations. Because the Osmonds weren't just a family, they were a machine built for entertainment. From an early age, every child was trained in music. Lessons, rehearsals, vocal coaching, everything revolved around work. Even what Marie wanted didn't matter much in that system. She was pushed into instruments she didn't enjoy and expected to keep up without question. At just 4 years old, she was already on television. While her brothers became teen idols, she was quietly pulled into the same world, whether she was ready or not. Later, Marie would admit something important. Childhood didn't feel like childhood. Requests to play or rest were often replaced with work. The message was constant: perform or fall behind. But what happens when a child grows up believing rest has to be earned? To the outside world, she was the smiling face of a famous family. Inside, she was carrying pressure she didn't understand yet. And as she got older, that pressure turned into something even heavier: trauma she kept hidden for years. She later revealed she had been mistreated by someone close to the family, not a relative, and the experience deeply affected her. What made it worse wasn't only what happened, but the silence around it, and the feeling that no one noticed. That silence stayed with her. It shaped how she saw safety, trust, and even herself. And all of this was happening while she was stepping into global fame, expected to perform like nothing was wrong. Still, she carved her own path. Choosing country music, she released Paper Roses in 1973, and it became a breakout hit that turned her into a star beyond her family name. But fame didn't ease the pressure. It multiplied it. She soon partnered with her brother Donny Osmond, and together they became a phenomenon with Donny and Marie, one of the biggest shows on television. But behind the spotlight, she often felt out of place, constantly comparing herself to Hollywood icons and struggling with self-image. At the same time, she faced unwanted attention from older men and harsh criticism about her appearance from executives who controlled the show. Despite being extremely thin, she was pressured to lose more weight. That pressure pushed her into dangerous habits, hiding how little she was eating while still performing at full energy. And all of it was happening while she was still a teenager. But behind the cameras, something inside her was beginning to crack, and what came next would change everything. Marie pushed back on the idea that women were treated as less important, but her explanation only sparked more backlash. She spoke about traditional households needing a patriarch and suggested that certain public discussions were historically handled by men. To many viewers, even in the late 1970s, it sounded outdated, but the interview was about to take an even more uncomfortable turn. Barbara Walters shifted the conversation to a controversial topic: why Black members of the Mormon Church were, at the time, barred from holding the priesthood. She directly asked Donny and Marie to explain it. Donny struggled to respond and eventually fell back on religious doctrine. Marie stayed mostly silent, and that silence was noticed. The interview damaged their image. For a family already criticized for being overly polished and disconnected from modern realities, the moment intensified public scrutiny in a way they couldn't control. But behind the cameras, Marie's real life was becoming even more unstable. In 1979, at just 20 years old, she got engaged to acting student Jeff Creighton. Within her strict religious upbringing, engagement wasn't casual. It meant commitment. But just 2 months later, the relationship collapsed, and that breakup quietly changed her trajectory. After that, Marie stepped into a more public, fame-driven dating life. She was linked with actors like Eric Estrada and Andy Gibb, a sharp contrast to her sheltered upbringing. Eventually, she looked for stability again. In 1982, she married basketball player Stephen Craig, and they had a son within a year. For a brief time, it seemed like she had found a normal life away from fame, but things were shifting on every front. Her music career slowed in the early 1980s, with a 1984 single barely charting. Still, she made a major comeback in 1985 with There's No Stopping Your Heart, scoring 2 number-1 country hits. At the same time, her marriage fell apart. She divorced Stephen Craig in 1985, later calling it deeply painful. In 1986, she married Brian Blossel, and together they built a large family of 7 children through birth and adoption. From the outside, it looked like stability. Career, marriage, and motherhood all aligned. But privately, her mental and physical health collapsed. After one pregnancy, she developed severe postpartum depression, with extreme sadness, fatigue, and uncontrollable shaking. At her worst, she drove for hours in a dissociated state, and later collapsed from exhaustion at home. Doctors warned her to slow down, but she kept pushing. The pressure of work, motherhood, and years of emotional strain finally caught up with her. Around the same time, behind the scenes of The Talk, rumors of tension and casting issues followed her, adding to public speculation about her place on the show. But her real story ran much deeper than television. In her memoir, Behind the Smile, Marie revealed she had survived childhood sexual abuse, kept secret for decades. She stayed silent out of fear and confusion, believing speaking out could harm her family. The abuse happened in trusted environments, and although she later clarified it was not a family member, the emotional damage lasted for years. Fear, confusion, and a shattered sense of safety. On the outside, she was a beloved public figure, but privately, she was carrying wounds no one could see. When people later asked why she didn't report it at the time, she explained something important. She grew up in a time when topics like that were rarely discussed openly. Silence was often expected, especially when families feared shame or public scandal. She believed she was protecting her family, so she buried the truth. But trauma doesn't stay buried. Even years later, Marie admitted she still had to process what happened and unlearn the belief that she was somehow responsible. That realization that she did nothing wrong took years to fully accept. In 2019, while co-hosting The Talk, she opened up about another deeply personal layer of that trauma. As a young child, around 8 or 9 years old, she believed she might be gay. But as she later explained, those feelings were not about identity. They were shaped by fear. The abuse had created a deep discomfort around men, leading her young mind to question everything she felt and understood about herself. That confusion also affected her self-image for years, as she struggled to separate trauma responses from identity. Over time, healing came in unexpected ways. Growing up as the only girl among brothers and being surrounded by her father and siblings slowly helped rebuild her sense of safety. Seeing consistent love and protection from the men in her family helped her reframe what she had experienced as a child. Eventually, she understood something life-changing. Her fear was learned from trauma, not who she was. Years later, in an interview with Meet at Oz, Marie revisited that chapter with a sense of closure. By then, she revealed that those responsible for the abuse were no longer alive.